I know the applause can keep coming. I see Dr. Joseph Tolorunse. Keep the applause coming as he makes his way to the stage, and he will start off with the opening presentation for the next 10 minutes, and this will set the tone for the first panel, which will also look at the theme. Keep the applause going till he gets to the stage. Please, can we have the correct lead? All right. As we await the correct presentation to be displayed, just a reminder that as we are taking pictures and recording videos and putting it out there. Yes, please, sir. Please, let's remember to use our hashtags, Beyond Compliance, hashtag NMDPRA, so we find your contributions, your memorable tweets, and of course, your pictures from today. It's important that we have that feedback.
The Honorable Minister has left and the Authority Chief Executive, but I will just start with the already established protocol. Ladies and gentlemen, my colleagues, my learned friends, you are to this year's edition of Legal Advisors Forum. I just want to correct one notion. This is the third edition. We started in year 2023. Last year we had it, though it was aborted midway, but this is the third one. So I'm here to make a presentation on our topic today, which is beyond compliance, driving regulatory certainty and investment confidence in Nigeria. Please, next slide. This is the outline of my presentation. Introduction, then uncertainty from overlapping requirements and implementation practices. Then we try to look at the meaning of regulatory certainty. What is the investors is expecting from regulatory certainty? We'll look at the General Counsel as an investment enabler, moving beyond compliance management. Well, what we must do differently, moving beyond compliance to regulatory partnership, then beyond compliance towards confidence. Then I will briefly examine the roles of regulators and the operators, and then conclude. Next slide. Just a comparison. Last year, 2025, what we were saying, and in this year, 2026, what are we talking about? The last year's theme borders on advancing a collaborative compliance culture in Nigeria mainstream and downstream petroleum sectors. We talked about collaboration between the regulator and the regulated. We said compliance should be a shared value, a culture, a partnership, and collaborative, and it should not be adversarial. We don't have to resort to the court or to arbitration before we settle our dispute amicably. Then we talked about early engagement to reduce disputes. Last year, we also looked at how legal advisors participate, how they need to participate early in business decisions, so that in the oil and gas sector, we know is very highly technical, but despite that fact, the legal advisor has a role to play. They need to participate from the project conception. We also talk about using ADR as a means of resolving our relationship. Then the result we had from last year, we now had very strong shareholders engagement. We also have feedback from them. And from the feedback we got, we were able to come up with new regulations. You know, even our own regulation, we look at it and we consolidated it and also digitize our processes. So the result of our discussion last year was really rewarding. This year, we're talking about, the question is not how do we improve the industry compliance culture. That was what we talked last year. But today, we are now looking at how do we transform regulatory certainty into a competitive advantage in the industry. You see, while compliance protects the system, regulatory certainty attracts investment. So what we are talking today is how do we attract investment, and not how do we inculcate compliance culture. Because if we attract investment, definitely there will be growth. Investment will create growth. It will strengthen our energy security. So the investment question we should be asking ourselves now is that how predictable is our regulation? How consistent are the regulatory decisions? How quickly are approvals obtained? Are the disputes, are they resolved? And how are they resolved quickly? You know, and how has the regulator been responsive to the regulated? All their questions, all their concerns, how have we agreed? So accordingly, the role of General Counsel continues to evolve. You know, as from last year, we have seen the evolution, what we are now talking about this year. Next slide, please. So uncertainty. You know, we are trying to look at what is uncertainty. You know, usually we're getting this uncertainty mostly from overlapping requirements and implementation practices. You know, the way the regulator, all the regulators, the overlapping functions, then the overlapping requirements along the value chain of our licenses. Then in the implementation practices, how do we implement it in order not to create uncertainty? So first, we look at the PIAs, like our ground norm, is the legal foundation. Implementation of PIA is now driving regulatory maturity. As we are implementing PIA, we are now seeing what are the regulatory requirements we need to come out of it. You know, so we discovered that we need to refine our regulatory landscape through stakeholder engagement. We have done a lot of stakeholder engagement in NMDPRA in order to refine our regulatory regulations. And then the result of that refining is the consolidation we had. We have to consolidate about 10 regulations into one. And we come up with a downstream petroleum operation regulation 2025, which we did last year. It's a major step towards simplifying compliance and reducing regulatory fragmentation. Like I said, over 10 regulations were combined into one. Not that we change it much, but we refine it, we consolidate it for ease of reference. Also, we have discovered that out of implementation of the PIA, there's recent policy initiatives of the federal government. You know, the president gave directives to the industry, which we are implementing. In fact, to the two regulators, which we are implementing now. It signals government's commitment to improving Nigeria investment competitiveness. You know, areas of overlapping jurisdictions have been addressed, and it's as a result of presidential directives. Next slide, please. Yeah, meaning of regulatory certainty. I try to look at what it actually means. What are the pillars of regulatory certainty? When we talk about regulatory certainty, we are talking about stable legal and policy framework. Because stability of fiscal rules throughout project lifespan will avoid policy reversal. You know, if our policy, if our legal framework is stable, then incidents of reversing policy will not occur. So one of the pillars is also it make long-term investment decisions with confidence. You know, the investors expect that they will be able to make long-term investment decisions with confidence. You know, they will not be afraid into investing. When the regulation is certain, the rules are clear, it is predictable, then investing will not be difficult for them. They can approach investment with confidence. Then we have strong institutional capacity. The regulator is expected, the investor is expected that the regulator should also have skilled personnel. You know, they are expected that the regulator should also imbibe strong modern technology, you know, so that they will have reliable data and they will be able to engage, to train their staff for professional development. So one of the pillars of certainty, regulatory certainty, also there must be a mechanism to resolve the dispute amicably, efficiently, and in a way that is not adversarial. So ADR is one of the options, arbitration, perhaps even specialized commercial courts. Recently, we know that for areas relating to energy and oil and gas, we have Federal High Court that advocate on such matters, but they can still do more. We can have special commercial courts that deals with those things. So it also requires consistent interpretation of regulatory requirements and decisions so that there should not be arbitrary interpretation of the laws. Then engagement must be transparent and predictable approval processes. So the investor also must understand regulatory obligations clearly. So all these principles, or will I say pillars of regulatory certainty, once they are in place, we can say our law, we have regulatory certainty. And that is what the investor expects in the industry. Next slide, please. General Counsel as an investment enabler, we are now moving beyond compliance to management. We're moving beyond compliance management. What we must do differently now? We must play a central role in enabling investment decisions, like I've said, helping our organizations to invest with confidence. We must help our organization to manage regulatory risk, identify early and structure transactions appropriately. And we must support commercial innovation, must strengthen corporate governance in our respective organizations, and we must facilitate constructive engagement with regulators. If you facilitate constructive engagement with regulators, this is an area that we can avoid disputes, that we can avoid also controversies. So don't feel free to approach the regulators, approach us, have constructive engagement with us, and we'll be able to sort out a lot of things. Next slide. What we must do differently, moving beyond compliance to regulatory partnership. We're also talking about partnership now. We must build compliance design. And in building our compliance design, we must integrate legal regulatory consideration, early stages of project planning. In our early stages of project planning, we must build a compliance design as part of our project. We don't have to wait till when there's a problem or there's a legal problem. So once we build that compliance design in our project at an initial stage, that will help. We must also engage proactively with the regulator. How can we do this? Consultation or dialogue to resolve issues before they become disputes. Then treat regulatory certainty. How do we treat regulatory certainty? As a strategic business asset. Make it a strategic business asset. Okay, thank you. make regulatory certainty a strategic business asset, not merely as a legal obligation. Don't see it as a legal obligation, but treat it as your asset. Next slide. I think my time is up. Next slide. Well, we're still talking about approaching investment with confidence. How do we do that? There must be clear laws. There must be consistent in our implementation. Then institution must be very responsive. Then share responsibility between regulator and industry. Then we have continuous stakeholders engagement, efficient dispute resolution mechanism. Go to the next slide. So these are the roles of the regulators. In our spare time, you can just have it. Go to the next slide. Next slide. These are the roles of the operators. In this, our shared culture, shared vision, these are the roles we are expected to perform. Operations will demonstrate this. Corporate governance, timely regulatory compliance, environmental stewardship, ethical business conduct, community development, accurate reporting. Your reporting to regulator, we expect it to be top-notch, to be accurate. Then the operational integrity. So a journey. What we are saying, regulatory certainty is a journey. You know, it's certainly, regulatory certainty is not a destination, but it is a journey. If you look at the journey, in 2021, petroleum industrial was made. Between 2022 and 2024, we tried to transit, develop our regulatory frameworks. In 2025, we imbibe collaborative compliance. We have General Counsel Legal Advisors Forum, where we talk about collaboration. And from that collaborative experience, we have our law consolidated. In 2026, we're talking about how our transportation tariff and presidential reform directives will continue to refine our law. So in conclusion, permit me to conclude by returning to the theme of this forum, beyond compliance, driving regulatory certainty and investment confidence in Nigeria petroleum sectors. These words capture an important truth. Compliance will always remain the foundation of an effective regulatory system, but it cannot be the destination. The destination is confidence. Confidence that investors can make long-term decisions with clarity. Confidence that operators understand regulatory expectations. Confidence that the authority will regulate fairly, transparently, and consistently. And confidence that together we can build a petroleum sector that is resilient, competitive, and globally attractive. Last year, we spoke about collaborative compliance, but this year, we are speaking about regulatory certainty. Perhaps next year, we will speak about something even more important, how regulatory certainty has translated into measurable growth, increased investment, stronger infrastructure, and greater energy security for our nation. With this, I think, okay, conclusion. This is my last conclusion. I'm sorry. He said, investment does not merely follow natural resources. We have abundant natural resources. You know, it doesn't mean that because we have abundant natural resources, investment will follow. No. You know, it follows certainty. Nigeria's petroleum future will be defined not only by the abundance of its hydrocarbons, but by the credibility, predictability, and integrity of the regulatory institution. So, thank you for listening to me. I'm ready to answer any questions. Thank you very much.